You see, during the war, the Allies wanted to psychologically analyse Hitler so they could predict his every move. So in October 1943, the Harvard Psychological Institute came back to them with this 240-page document analysing Adolf Hitler's personality. And this document gives an extremely unflattering view of Hitler's personality. It also knows some very intrusive things about him that only he and his therapist should know. It convinces me that Hitler absolutely did not have any real friends, okay? Everybody who knew him must just have been pretending to be friends with him for money and power. Hitler wasn't just evil because he was a genocidal Hun, though he was. Hitler was just awful as a person. And the worst part of all of it is that Hitler never ever got to read this book in his lifetime. Why not? If I had the power to go back in time and kill baby Hitler, I wouldn't. I would go back in time and read in this book. So grab your sauerkraut, pop your syphilis vaccine, and let's make fun of somebody in the bottom 25% of art students. I will add that please don't take the information in this book at face value. I'm making this video because I think the things they said about Adolf Hitler are funny. However, I'm not sure how much of it is true. They are armchair psychologizing somebody effectively based on a 1943 understanding of psychology, which is much lower than what it is today. And to be clear, they didn't even get to speak to Hitler directly to make this book, so I just highly doubt how accurate the information is. So please, take every statement made in this video as with a grain of salt. Almost every psychologist at the time agreed that Adolf Hitler has what is called a
reaction formation.
This is when you suppress certain parts of your personality and massively exaggerate the opposite parts of it. So in Hitler's case, he suppressed compliance, love, conscience, and massively exaggerated his aggression, his revenge, his dominance, his superiority. The reason for this was because Hitler didn't really grow up as a dominant person. He was extremely submissive and afraid of his father. He was frail, weak, never did any manual work, never did athletics, often fell into poor health. Even during World War I, he was annoyingly obedient to his superior officers. In other words, Hitler was ashamed of his youth and wanted to leave it behind him. So, he tried to squish it. He became the masculine, manly Sigma Chad. Sigma D's nut. He did so much propaganda about the ideal of the masculine Aryan man. He said, "I am one of the hardest men Germany has had for decades, perhaps for centuries." That's why he'd never dream of engaging in any such activities like atonement, expression of gratitude, repayment of debts. No, they're all too feminine and submissive. Only beta males pass the time like that. So what do psychologists think of this? Well, if we type the word feminine into the search bar 17 times, oh my god. This book is divided into 3 sections, and near the beginning of all 3 of those sections, he is described as extremely feminine. His hips are wide, his shoulders relatively narrow, his muscles are flabby, his legs thin and spindly. Hitler's physical strength and ability are definitely below average. He has long, tapering, sensitive fingers. His movements have been described as womanish. A dainty, ladylike way of walking, effeminate gestures of his arms, a peculiar graceless ineptitude reminiscent of a girl throwing a baseball. Now, obviously there's nothing wrong with being feminine. If there are any femboys watching this, then cute dress. No, I'm making fun of Hitler because he spent the entirety of his life comparing Germany to a woman who would submit to him. But when a psychologist's actually trying to write about him, they call him a girl at the beginning of all 3 chapters. So in other words, while Hitler was very feminine, Germany still did end up being that metaphorical woman who submitted to him. So in other words, Hitler was a lesbian. Moving on, I know for a fact that Murray, Vernon, and whoever else had so much fun writing this, because they spend a good chunk of this book just making fun of Hitler. For example, here, let me read you a list of actual quotes from the book. Hitler's ego is surprisingly weak. His tantrums have often been described. Such unmanly display of infantile tolerance to frustration, of tears and shrieks, is entirely out of keeping with his own ideal of the Iron Supermensch. An unbelievable capacity to tell falsehood, and a total innocence of promises and assertions he made only a moment before. He resembles a second-rate waiter, a smallish man slightly under average height. His forehead is slightly receding and his nose is somewhat incongruous with the rest of his face. The latter is somewhat soft, his lips thin and the whole face expressionless. Hitler's superstitiousness, his feeling that he is an object of divine protection. He is said to hear voices and see spirits. Hitler's voices encourage brutality and destruction. He is down, according to one informant in the Vienna police records, as a sex pervert. Hitler's favourite entertainment is to witness private performances of naked dancing. Now here are some Hitler quotes from the book. "I am freeing men from the restraints of an intelligence that has taken charge, from the dirty and degrading modifications of a chimera called conscience and morality, from the demands of a freedom and personal independence, which only very few can bear. That actually sounds like a satirical sentence, but Hitler apparently said that unironically. Conscience is a Jewish intervention. It's like a blemish circumcision. I forbade the sacrifice of more human lives than was absolutely necessary. He said this in reference to his invasion of Poland. Do you not realise that you are in the presence of the greatest German ever known to history? They describe his personality as counteractive narcissism. This includes traits such as inability to take a joke, tendency to hold grudges, who'd thunk, a low tolerance for criticism, extravagant demands for attention and applause, refusal to accept subordination under anybody, even if it will benefit him, determination, never giving up under any circumstances, and belittling others, and compulsive criminality, which makes you feel guilty about doing something evil, but of course you're not guilty because you're the masculine alpha who doesn't feel guilty about anything. So you do more evil to prove to yourself that you really don't feel guilty about anything. But as soon as it becomes impossible to do more evil, you suffer mental breakdown, and in Hitler's case, shoots himself. Another interesting thing about this book is that it says Hitler felt weak on the inside and he wanted to purge all weakness from the German education system. But because of the faded ink, it looks to me like woke, which if it was a word, it would be pronounced woke. So I read this as Hitler felt woke on the inside and wanted to purge wokeness from the German education system. I mean, guys, we all know Hitler isn't homophobic. I mean, his best friend is gay. Ernst Röhm. Does anybody remember what happened to him? Speaking of the Night of the Long Knives, Hitler seemed to shut down for a bit every time he committed a particularly horrible atrocity, and that isn't a defense of Hitler in any way. However, let me read you a quote from the book. After the bloody purge of 1934, Night of the Long Knives, for example, it is said he was not able to sleep quietly for weeks. At night he prowled restlessly up and down. His depressions and fearful nightmares can be explained as resultants of disquieting guilt feelings. Aww, he felt guilty. Another interesting thing about this book is that they managed to dig up things that they just should not be able to know. Like, with the amount of dirty secrets they were able to find by Hitler, it convinces me that this book was probably written by 4chan in reality. Content warning, if you don't want to hear me talk about Adolf Hitler's sex life, skip to this timestamp on screen now. And no, I won't talk about anything graphic. I will acknowledge that Hitler did have sex on multiple occasions, and I'll mention, without going into detail, about what he was into. If you can handle that, you'll be fine. That's your warning. 3, 2, 1... They bring up how when he was 12 he was caught in a sexual act with a little girl, how he was a full-fledged sexual masochist, unable to have sex properly, unable to demonstrate masculine dominance in front of a woman. The reason he was such a masochist was because he had such complete control over Germany that Mother Nature made him a sub to compensate. Sorry, how do you know this? How on earth do you know what Hitler likes to do in the bedroom, okay? Is this what US intelligence does, okay? Spying on Nazi troop movements? Boring. Predicting his future plans? I'd rather watch paint dry. But finding out how to arouse the commander of the Third Reich, well, look at them just fighting the good fight, doing their duty to bring glory to the great nation of America that apparently watches world leaders getting railed. Turns out the way they found all this out was they analysed the roughly 3,000 odd metaphors he uses in Mein Kampf to determine things about his sexuality. Pardon me, can you determine things about somebody's sexuality based on the metaphors they choose to use? Listen, far be it from me to question these 1943 psychology experts that are armchair diagnosing a very secretive man they've never met before based on the metaphors he chooses to use in a book he wrote well over a decade ago with the collaboration of another man. So the metaphors might not be his, in other words. But I'm a little bit skeptical, so I looked it up and turns out yes, you can tell some stuff about your personality based on which metaphors you choose to use. However, psychologists only started looking into this a few years ago. So if somebody says my soul is located within my heart, they are more likely to be warm, loving people, versus if somebody says my soul is located within their head, they're more likely to be cold and calculating. Listen, I'm not an expert in any of this, so I'm not going to say that they're lying or spreading untruths, but if there are any psychologists in the comment section, can you please weigh in on that? However, there are also informants who back up a lot of these theories, including some informants who claim that Hitler's nightmares are indicative of gay panic. Sorry? Are you telling me there's somebody close enough to Hitler that Hitler is willing to tell them about his homosexual nightmares, and then that person is then turning around and gossiping to the US intelligence agency about them? And they use the word informants with a plural, so I can only assume there must be more than one of these people. And they say Hitler didn't have any close friends, so meaning the few people he did have that were close to him, I can only conclude that everybody Hitler was best friends with was an American spy. Okay, fine, let's be generous here. It's perfectly possible that maybe Hitler told his close friends, those close friends spread the rumours, and then people heard those rumours and told Uncle Sam. Okay, so we do have some genuinely interesting things to talk about at the end. They do come up with more ways to make fun of Hitler's personality, that I'm not going to go into here, but you can read the book if you want. But the bits I'm interested in now are the suggestions they give for what to do with Hitler and predictions for what he might do next. So Hitler had frequent emotional collapses in which he wept and yelled, and they knew that as defeat became more and more inevitable, Hitler's mental collapses would become more and more frequent. But a very interesting suggestion is that Hitler would arrange to have himself assassinated. You see, the Hitler myth was the famous propagandic idea of Hitler being a perfect, noble person who was basically God to the German people. And if Hitler was betrayed by a German or a friend, then that would seal Hitler's fate as a man who would go down in German history as a great man. Put it this way, how did Caesar die? His best friend betrayed him. How did Jesus die? His best friend betrayed him. And that is crucial, by the way, because Hitler did want to make himself look like, effectively, Jesus. So that was an interesting possibility, but another one was that Hitler may die in battle, martyring himself and once again, completing the Hitler myth, okay? Another suggestion they made was that Hitler would just go insane or kill himself. But they predicted that Hitler would kill himself in the most dramatic way imaginable. Retreat to the top of an impregnable hill, wait until the Allied troops come to capture him, and then blow the hill to bits using dynamite. Jump off a cliff and throw himself into a fire. This would martyr himself and complete the Hitler myth, and while they were right, he did kill himself, it wasn't quite as dramatic as that. The other one is that what if Hitler took refuge in a foreign country? Now, Hitler himself would never dream of abandoning the German people. However, what if one of his close friends drugged him, flew him to, say, Switzerland or Sweden, and convinced him that he should stay there and write the long-planned Bible he was planning to write for the German people? This would make Hitler look like a coward who fled his country and probably break the Hitler myth, which is why Hitler probably wouldn't want to do so. But by far my favourite prediction was what if Hitler was captured by the Allies? The book describes this as both the most desirable and least likely possibility. You see, if the Allies capture Hitler, they can't kill him because that would martyr him. They can't exile him because that would martyr him. So here's a brain teaser for you. Imagine you've just captured Hitler. You can't kill him, and you can't exile him, so what do you do with him without making him a martyr? Well, you can pause the video if you want to guess in a comment. However, the people in this book came up with a really clever idea. They were going to capture Hitler, put him on trial, but then, partway through the trial, they were going to declare that Hitler was completely insane, okay? He was in no mental state to be put on trial. So instead, they would take him to a mental hospital and heavily document his craziness. Every time Hitler had a fit of neurosis in which he would just break down, weep and boo-hoo and yell, film that neurosis and put it on TV for all of Germany to see. Show Germany just how much of a madman Hitler is. Then, you can truly break the Hitler myth. But that's very unlikely because Hitler may just kill himself or go down in battle before he allows himself to be captured. So, how do we prevent Hitler from killing himself? Well, an interesting idea they had was to drop leaflets over Germany saying that Hitler was planning to kill himself. And then you paint Hitler's suicide as an act of betrayal. Say that Hitler is abandoning the German people, he is taking the easy way out by choosing to shoot himself in the head. Then, if Hitler kills himself, well, it breaks the Hitler myth, it makes him look like a coward, but if Hitler doesn't kill himself, well, he gets captured. So it's a win-win. Unless you're Hitler. The other idea they had was to tell Hitler that if he was captured, they would allow him to live out the rest of his days on St. Helena, the same island which the British exiled Napoleon to. And as Hitler really admired and looked up to Napoleon, a similar fate to Napoleon may be appealing to Hitler. Of course, they weren't actually going to send him to St. Helena. This was a lie to convince Hitler to surrender. From what I can tell, pretty much none of their recommendations actually ended up happening. For example, they said they should break the Hitler myth by having Hitler be the one to sign the surrender, which didn't happen. They also suggested that, obviously, dropping leaflets over Germany. They also gave a lot of suggestions as to what to write on those leaflets to discredit Hitler and make him look bad. For example, every time they sent in news of what was going on at the front, written on those leaflets, they would also include a passage from the initial, unedited version of Mein Kampf that would show to the German people just how much Hitler hated them. Because that's the thing about Hitler, he never ever liked the lower classes, okay? Hitler always favoured the people at the top, okay? He was the admirer of Frederick the Great and Napoleon, not those plebeians at the bottom, okay? We know that now, and they wanted to convince the German people of that. They said that after the war, an international court containing at least one Swiss individual and at least one Swede should declare a list of Nazi war criminals that are going to be tried for war crimes. And they said that any country who dared harboured any of those men should be invaded by the Allies. Just one more thing before this video is over. This book talks about how to win the respect of the German people. They say they have to garrison Germany with the finest troops they have to really impress those militaristic Germans, to show that the Allied troops really are worth something. And they also want to show respect to the German people and culture, or at least as much respect as can be shown when you're occupying them. Additionally, they recommended that Germany should be treated as an equal in whatever international body was created after the war. This ended up being the United Nations, and this did not end up happening, by the way. Neither East nor West Germany were allowed into the UN until 1973. Although, in fairness, they were allowed into the Warsaw Pact and NATO, and West Germany was quite a crucial and strategically important member of NATO. So this was fun. It was nice to laugh at Hitler. It was a very special occasion for me, because as somebody who spent their entire life Googling fun facts on the internet, I promise you, it is very rare to come up with a find just this interesting. I think this might only be the second time ever that I've discovered a rabbit hole just that arouses my interest so much. I think the only other time was like a year ago. Of course, apparently Hitler also said some pretty insane things in Mein Kampf that are very easy to laugh at, so I might read Mein Kampf and then just make a video in which I laugh at the things he said in Mein Kampf. Like, for example, if he actually said conscience is a Jewish invention and he put generosity, conscience, intelligence, whatever on his hit list, then I can almost guarantee you the rest of Mein Kampf has some just absolutely ridiculous statements in it, so I might make that video next. Equally, though, I probably don't want to make too much of a joke out of genocide and racism, so we'll see. I'll read Mein Kampf to see if there's anything interesting in it, and then I'll, consider the video and see if I can make the video in a way that's, respectful and sensitive, and if it turns out there's no way to do the video, well, I won't make it. We'll see. However, that probably isn't going to be in the next video. The next video, which will probably come out on Sunday after this video is posted, is going to be the Persia during World War I video. I made that video a year ago and I want to remake it because it's bad. It was a missed opportunity. Anyway, if you have any other rabbit holes you think I'd enjoy or books you'd like me to read and review, please suggest them in the comments. Otherwise, bye.